Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Glenn Rosso. I am a part of the library board. For those of you watching this online, this is not a board meeting. This is not a township meeting, yet the township, unbeknownst to me, but at least this time I'm standing in front of the camera instead of my bald head on the back. They sent a camera crew, so again, it's kind of interesting that the township sends out camera crews to informational meetings in the township. So from that perspective, this is not a board meeting. This is just an informational update meeting. A lot of you have been on the website and you've seen the information, but I thought it would be good to go over it once again. I want everybody to be on the same factual, or at least factual from the way I see it, baseline. So if there's any questions, as supporters, hopefully supporters are here, or even people that aren't supportive could become more factually informed about the process and the progress that the library has been through over the years. So kind of level set everybody. Also, I know in my mailbox today, you got to join us. Maybe yours came earlier. Mine always seems to be the last one delivered, and then I know they're out. So I definitely encourage everybody, and we'll come back to it again, take yet one more night of your week this week on Wednesday. There's a meeting coming up for which everybody will come into a little bit later, but hopefully you can also attend that. I think it's equally as important for you all to get involved on the study analysis community presentation, 7 o'clock at the Lakeland Auditorium. So that's coming up. Unfortunately, I was thinking we were going to do a different screen, but we're not. So I get to kind of scroll through this one. Actually, I want to start with the library board and who it is and what it is. I mean, you entrusted people to operate your library from a board level. So from that, during the election, I can say everybody that ran for board position won. It's not a very crowded field. Feel free to sign up. There is no pay, there is no benefits, other than you get to meet a lot of people like yourselves, which in itself is a nice benefit. On our board, we do have a president of a company, entrepreneur, over 100 employees. Unfortunately, there's some financial people on this. I am one of them, so I can say that. Alphabet soup, CPA, MBAs, so we've got the education, type people, but also more than that. We have actual working, practicing people. Our treasurer is a retired vice president and controller of an $11 billion company. So knows what it is to be putting out cash flows and projections. So from that perspective, we've got one of the board members at MBA, worked on large projects, over $1 billion of purchases for General Motors, knows timelines, knows budgets, knows how to get things done. So from that perspective, that's why when you see us talk about timelines, status updates, it's a pretty regimented process. One of our board members you actually did not elect. Unfortunately, one of our board members that was elected passed away, and so we were very fortunate to have Karen come on board as a person that was selected, and she has a lot of non-elected positions in city government. So knows how things should run. Let's put it that way. And we also have a banking professional. 4 of our board members have served over 8 years each. So there is longevity here. So when we talk about what has happened in the past, we can actually say that with knowledge, at least the recent past. So from that perspective, we have a pretty good group, and I really enjoy working with them. The presentation, or at least the slides that I'm going to go through, and I am referring to my notes quite a bit. This was a collaborative effort, so all of the board members had input to what would be said, how to say it. So I'm trying to honor their wishes. I think that's important for you to know. from a position of, if you're watching board meetings, there was one that was videotaped with my bald head, where the township came over and presented, and that was basically the first time that the township trustees even saw what the vision was. So it was one person presenting and the rest of them just nodding to go along. So we're a pretty cohesive group. So this presentation hopefully honors their wishes. So there are a couple differences between the two elected boards, but they basically have one thing in common. These boards are independent of one another, but ultimately each board reports to you, the people of White Lake. So from that perspective, we do serve at your request. So the other differences of the boards are, this board, as I already mentioned, you can run for it. The pay is awesome. The other board is paid, so you are paying them various amounts depending on if it's a working position versus a trustee position, but they do get paid. You can look at their budget and the board budget for the township. And I did this presentation 2 months ago, so I'm not going to quote the number exactly, but their budget for under the heading of board is like over $100,000. So they do, and that's not just their pay. And it's probably not fair, but I just remember looking at the budget the way it was. I think the other thing, we try to, in our presentation, there was people, asking questions and throwing out things and thoughts. So while not trying to answer everybody, that's impossible. There is, only a few of us and many of you. We did want to step back and what's the mission and purpose of a library versus, what some people think it is. Because the mission and purpose of the library, it really offers the opportunity for the community to gather and grow. I mean, you can come here, you can be here for whether it's your kids, your teens, your adults. There's all different kinds of programs. So there's various entities that are served, not just one group. So it's really a place for you to gather and grow. And that was one of the real impetuses of the new library. If you look at this space, as I see the people that are coming in thinking the meeting was going to start at 8 o'clock or 8:05, they're like trying to fit in. Sorry, we started early. That's why it's a little bit harder to get in. The new facility will not make this such a cozy atmosphere. Although we will have a folding wall, so we can push people together just to make sure that you're gathering and growing together. The library is leading to literacy. I mean, people come here to learn to read. So, I mean, some people can say the library's Google. Well, that doesn't quite always cut it. Hopefully you can find enjoyment here, enrichment here. Most of all, at some point in time, there could be some knowledge learned, and it should be a lifelong learning. So that's really the mission and purpose of the library. Contrary to a facility across the parking lot that really isn't have this mission or purpose. There's been a lot of discussion about the whole finance and the fiduciary responsibilities. I agree. We're into it. That's fine. The fiduciary responsibility of the library board is to be fiduciary responsibility for the library. We don't manage roads, we don't manage garbage reception, we only manage the library. There's been questions, comments, about whether or not we can sustain ourselves in a new facility and all that. That's why I brought you back to who's on the board. This wasn't just, oh geez, let's go, build something. The board, in its responsibility from the very beginning, took a very serious approach to how much should the proposal be for? 2 million, 20 million, what's the right number? We did a lot of research, you know, what did Commerce Builders for, what does so-and-so build for, what can you get for this, you know, what's that? So we put a lot of effort and time into what's the right number, and then, well, wait a minute, what does that mean for you? What does it mean for you? If you have a house worth this, what is that gonna cost that person per year? Can they get that value from a new facility? So, I mean, it wasn't just, oh, let's just go build the best thing we can with 60-foot spans and just look beautiful. It was, how much do we think each individual could, and I don't want to use the word afford, but be willing to sacrifice, and can we demonstrate the value in it? There's actually on our website, there's a library value calculator. Feel free to go out and look at it. I mean, you can come here, you can get DVDs if that's your business, you know, and you don't want to go to the red box. You can, I mean, there's just lots of different things for each individual to find value in what we offer, and it may be different for each one of you what you perceive to be the value. So we looked at the for our fiduciary responsibility over the 8 years that the board has been together, more or less, the same people. Our fund balance, that's our savings account, has grown from basically 2 months of operating costs to 6. I equate that to the financial planner telling you in your own personal life, you should have 3 months worth of bills, well, depending on who you talk to, 3 months, 6 months, you know, worth of money on hand in case something goes wrong. So we did that for the library. We went from a very, you know, tight situation, and over the years, we built up a fund balance. We also looked back, I mean, we talked about the financial crisis, 2008, 2009. We said, what is happening to the individuals in the community? We should reflect that to the individuals that work there. They did not get pay raises. They pay for their benefits, a portion. So as each one or many of you, when you go to work and all of a sudden your company says, you know what, if you want those benefits, now you're gonna have to pay a part. We did the same thing here, and we're not talking about highly paid individuals. The highest paid individual in the library makes less than $80,000. So we're not talking about, you know, people making 200 grand that, you know, can pay $1,000 for their health care for the year. So I mean, it was a big deal, but it was the thought process that the library should reflect the citizens that it serves. And I bring that up, the staff here is totally separate than the staff across the street at the township building. They're paid differently, their compensation's different, their benefits are different. So we didn't wait for any lead from anybody else. We took it upon ourselves to do that. So you look at the 401k retirement plan, we have no pension for our employees. It's a 401k, it's defined, you know, it's just a deposit and done. There is no legacy cost. So one of the first meetings I heard at the township was somebody from public service going, wait a minute, what's it gonna do to the pension that is unfunded balance, you know? So we don't have to worry about that over here. Also, the last bullet, because I'm a finance guy, we always like to talk about this stuff. A clean audit opinion. That means that an outside individual or individuals have come in and they've looked at the operation, and yes, every once in a while to justify their existence, they'll come up with a management comment, meaning you could do this better, or you could do this, or you should do that. But other than that, the operation here is clean, and there is no issues with the financial accounting from the library. So we are also pretty proud of that. I forgot when I was talking about the mission and purpose of the library, one of the things that people find like, wow. When you look at the library over the last 5 years, we averaged just under 85,000 visitors. There's a chair up here if you want. There's one up front. Chicken. There's 85,000 on average come through here every year. And I'm a simple guy, so using simple math, that's 7,000 people a month. That's 295 people a day. So when you start thinking about the foot traffic and the people and the, the touch points, there are a lot of people that come into the library. The most interesting fact learned recently, and I'm just taking a pause because I'm looking across the faces I see. The largest group of users is the millennials. It's a big surprise. Everybody's like, oh, they don't go to libraries, they don't use libraries, they don't need libraries. What are we doing in the library for? Nobody uses them. The millennials use it the most, and it's from the Pew Research Group, so reputable. It wasn't like my own research group to come up with a fact, but they value the library the most because of the diverse offerings the library has to have. So as we expand the library and can improve our offerings, it's the young people, and as somebody said, that we want more young people to live in the community. It's a library that has lots of offerings that actually is something that's interesting for them. Carrying on, more specifically to this project, the fiduciary responsibility of the project, we set an affordable budget. It's 8.6 million. Whoa, that's affordable? 8.6 million. We spent $600,000 on the property, so we're down to 8 million. Then you have to pay all the legal, the consulting, and all these people. When it gets down to it, the actual physical building is in the neighborhood of $5 million. So there's other things. There's about $500,000 for furniture. We will use 85% and trying to inch that up more of the furniture we have here. So we're not going out and throwing everything out and have a big garage sale and buying new. We're reusing all the chairs you're sitting on. In 2 years, hopefully, you'll be able to sit on them in the new facility. Unfortunately, this table probably won't quite make it. It's got quite a few nicks in it. So let's just say we will try to do the right thing with that. We're using a selection process, more business, good fiduciary responsibility wise. We're using 3 vendors. We did that process when we selected our construction manager. A construction manager is taking the role of, they're with the architect firm, the architects draw it, they give it to the construction manager then looks and estimates what the cost is gonna be, and then they give it back to the architect and say, we can't afford it. And then the architect gives it back, and then they say, well, close, but not quite, so they give it back. And so they play this role back and forth and trade off. The architect will come up with, well, if we do raised floors, you get this value, because then you don't have to do this. And so they make the construction manager work for their part of it, but to come up with what's the budget that we can actually work with. Then the construction manager will bid out to the contracts. It's an open bidding process. It's open, I mean, they will actually unseal bids in public, so it's not like, well, let's get my brother to get the award or anything like that. So they will follow through this whole process. The construction manager company we chose specifically works with dollars. From a library perspective, they did Redford Library from scratch. They just finished improvements at the Plymouth Library. And for some of you that have kids or go to church, they did a couple additional improvements at St. Pat's. So local, Farmington Hills, family owned, and so far I've been extremely proud of what they've done for us. So they're staying on the ball and doing really well. So we like that, especially because they're used to public dollars, and they have a process to make sure that all the paperwork's in place, and it's also easy for the township, because they'll be able to submit, here's the list of the bills that we need to pay this week. Township, you could give us a check, and then they actually cut the checks to all the individuals. So we did that. We've also hired, as I just said, the architect firm. This architect firm has been calling on us since the very first time we did a mission and strategy meeting back in like 2010. So they've been coming and looking at it. They're from the middle and west side of the state. They do libraries. They've got Kalkaska going right now, and a couple others. So these are not just people that build buildings. We actually did have, in our construction manager portfolio, we did bring in somebody that was non-library, non-public, just to make sure that it wasn't like a closed-knit clique, that these guys got really high payments, and the guys working for somebody else were getting lower, and that wasn't the case. So we were pretty happy with that. The construction manager at the very beginning gave us a timeline. It would say, this is when we're gonna get these things done. I think it's about a 40-line item timeline, and so we have that. That timeline was presented directly to the township at the beginning of May, and I'll come back to that later. But the timeline says that we should have, we're probably like a couple weeks behind from a construction drawing point of view. Those should be pretty much finished, but we need to get our site plan approved to make sure that they're putting the building exactly in the right spot to finish it. And our expectation is that we will be going out for quotes for all of the contractors to build it January 1st. They feel that that timeline is beneficial for all of us, because that is when the workers aren't out in the field working. They're looking for the jobs of what they're going to do, so they can get the best quotes at that time. So that's why we're really, really, really pressing this timeline to stay on it, so we're in the right position to get the best bids possible for us. We want to continue to be physically responsible, and we will be. Financially, we're still making progress and going forward. Our consultants are still working, we're still drawing. Next week, there's a meeting, and hopefully we'll actually be getting close to finalizing the interior furniture. And on the 21st, that's when the team will get back together with the architects and the construction manager to hopefully finalize the construction, the final plans. I'll point out some of the things here in a little bit as far as the library and the layout. So we continue to be fiduciary responsible on the project. I'll digress for a second, because this is, we're going from consultants to, well, what kind of faucet do you want in this room? What size water tank should be in this kitchen versus what size should be in that kitchen? So, there are so many details and so many things to go through to make sure that the consultants are getting the right costing, the right bidding. And I know for myself, I'm learning things that I will never need again, but it's kind of like, wow. There's a lot of things like, how can you operate a 30,000 square foot building efficiently and not cost more money than the building you're in? The new facility, the new building, they've cut this floor plan into 7 or 8, depending on the last time I talked to them, different heating zones. So if it's like tonight and the library closes, but we still have the library closes and we still have a meeting going on, and it's the middle of summer, middle of winter, there'll still be heat or air conditioning going. So, they rationalize all that. And then it was interesting, because it was like, there's all kinds of rules, how much air, fresh air, cold air, all this stuff. But they put in a carbon dioxide measurement. So as all you guys start breathing, it measures that, whoa, wait a minute, there's a lot more than the normal 10 people that are supposed to be here, so we need a lot more fresh air. So it starts functioning that way, and then when we all leave, it's like, well, don't bring in all that cold air because it's gonna be 47 degrees tonight. We don't need it because we don't have all this carbon dioxide, so therefore we don't need fresh air. So there's ways in which they're building the facility to operate it much more economically than this two-story building that we're in now. So, so from that perspective, I think it's pretty interesting. The last thing that, when we looked at it, the cost per square foot is gonna end up being about $170. You can go out, and it's interesting when you look at residential homes, you know, everybody looks at, you know, what's the cost per square foot, that's one thing to look at. But when they said $170, it's like, well, is that reasonable? I mean, what's the measuring stick? How do you know if that's reasonable or not? I really couldn't find anything, other than to say that this isn't gonna be world-class library, this isn't gonna be on Architectural Digest magazine or library whatever. But so far, I think we are really proud of how we've put the library together, including the inside and the outside. And when I come back to is $170 per square foot reasonable, the only government number in Michigan that I could come up with is for a school. Yes, it's not a school, but there the government allows the bonds to go up to $226 a square foot. So we're substantially less than if it was a school project. So from that perspective, I think we're doing pretty good. Unfortunately, I think I've covered the second page. We went through the bidding process. So we've got that. This is important because I want you all to be, like I said, factually correct. So when you're discussing the library and what we've done and what we haven't done, this is a timeline of what we believe and what we've gone through, because this is the voice of the resident. This is your voice or your neighbor's voice that moved away, what they wanted and what they saw. This isn't, you know, 5 people on a board today saying, geez, what do we want to do? You know, this is what we think. Now, in 2008, we had our first vision, mission, and strategic plan. Remember I told you the board's all these business people? Well, guess what? The library wasn't, you know, the library director and assistant director were, whoa, this is public, this isn't business. Well, we brought a little business into it. We put together the vision, the mission, and the strategic plan. And then we did a needs assessment in 2010. We looked at what was requested, and we said, okay, we flipped the library because the children area, they wanted it separate. So, I mean, we brought the kids downstairs, so it, you know, contained. We've done things that you may or may not notice. All of the lighting fixtures in the library were changed out to be more cost effective. So we've done the things within the walls that we could do. But one of the burning desires way back when was more space. We looked at, could we go this way? Could we go this way? There's a little atrium in between the 2 wings. Could we do that? You know, what could we get to increase the size of the facility? We could get a lot no, we couldn't get a lot of square footage, but we could get a lot of cost. So there really wasn't a good way to go about it. So we've done what you, the residents, wanted within the walls, within the programming, within what we have to offer for what we feel we could. In 2013, we updated that plan, and unfortunately, or fortunately, the request was still the same. We need more space. There's people that want to sign up for programs, but they can't because they're closed, because there's only so much space. There's, you know, a lot of people that their lives change from day to day, and they would like to drop into something, but you got to register, so I can't. So we heard all that. It is a space issue. If you guys out there want to come in, there's one seat in the front row. It's all yours, less than $1. So, you know, in 2016, once again, we looked at it, we've done what you wanted, except for the facility. It was at that time, in early 2016, a couple of people walked across the parking lot, discussed with the township what we thought our plans were, what do they want to put in as input, what are you going to do, what plans do you have, what can we do? And they have no plans. In early 2016, they had no plans. It was a function of, we don't think we'll do anything for at least 5 years. God bless you, go forth, conquer, do what you want, but nothing from our point. In March of 2016, the township officials unanimously voted to put the library bond on the ballot. And to be clear, there is only one trustee that's currently on the Whiteley Township Board that wasn't there. And Liz happened to be on the library board, so I'm pretty sure I know what her position is. And actually, her position hasn't changed. She is definitely in favor of the library. So when we talk about the Whiteley Township Board of Trustees, I can say with almost 100% certainty, I should be saying the male portion of the Whiteley Township Board of Trustees is against it. Okay, so when you're discussing with the township trustees, don't lump them all together. Just look for the guys. So from that perspective, I think you guys should support the women of the board. So this library should be no surprise. This building and proposal is absolutely no surprise to the elected officials. In August of 16, it was supported by the citizens, and again, I thank you. And for those of you that didn't vote for it, I'm so happy you're still here, because I really believe that we can show you some value in the proposal down the road. So from that perspective, I again thank you. In winter of 2017, that was like soon to come again, winter, but I'm talking about the winter that started the year. We completed the 30,000 square foot allocation. So this took a few meetings, a lot of input. We went back to what the people wanted and said they wanted, and we've allocated space. So green space, other than the washrooms, I mean, this is public meeting room. There's a big media center, a collapsible wall, so lots of people can fit in. Dennis, the architect, isn't here, and I don't have it written down, but like 300 people standing, sitting, tables. Again, closed off at night, so people can come and use it later after it's actually used. Oh, I thought that was all this red. Children's, young adults area. There will be accesses to the outdoors. It's important to understand that this is a one-story facility, so there's easy access for the kids outdoors. It's not coming off the second floor balcony with some kind of zip line. It's right there. Likewise, access patio, so if we do a company wants to, rent the space, outdoor meeting space will be available. So hopefully, very nice and inviting. You walk in the front door, you'll be able to see right through. This is the new materials. This is the cozy, casual area, the fireplace. This is the place for you to sit, gather, reflect, and enjoy your coffee, for which I think it's on this wall over here. It's a little coffee station. Something really exciting, something different that we have no space here to offer is this Idea Lab. This is a large space that on a monthly basis, and God, I mean Denise and Larry are back there, so I'll get in trouble, but 1 month it's how to quilt. You never quilted, but you want to know how. So it'll be set up, you can come in and try it. Next month it could be how to repair trains, little trains. So all your grandpas out there that are trying to fix all those trains, you know, you can do that. I don't know, just all kinds of longer term. You don't just come in for 2 hours and do it, but it's set up for the whole month. So you can really come in, and as this is all glass, as you're walking in and you didn't realize it was going on, you'll see it, and then you're like, well, maybe I do want to try that. And you'll be able to try it and join. So really try to get you into the mood of doing something different. All over here is the adult collection. Going back to the meeting and gathering, and I just saw this on the news last night. They were told the kids in Detroit, if you don't have a safe place to study after school, go to the library. Guess what? All of this yellow here, 2 3-person conference rooms, meeting places, tutoring locations. So right now we have 2. So, I mean, that took care of those, so expanded space. Over here, even better, a smaller meeting room, so you're not lost in up here, but nevertheless, a nice meeting room with, you know, more expanded conference room table. The check-in area, service desk, so they can see everything that's going on, so really good. For those of you that don't like the rain, snow, and wind, drive up, book drop. So, you know, trying to meet the conveniences of everybody. And yes, we do have staff and they do take space. So we have that. Up front here in the gallery lobby, room for displays and whatnot. So we think we've done a nice job. 30,000 square foot, although the architect will now tell us it's 29,998 or 2. He's off a couple feet. Is it 2? 2. See, I'm doing this from memory. So he's shrunk it down. So we're meeting the commitment because we feel you voted for a 30,000 square foot building. We're giving you a 30,000 square foot building. You voted to put it on the property that we had proposed. We closed on that, so we're doing that. So this is your voice. We are only delivering on what was in the proposal, and we're still trying to meet the timeline that was in the proposal, which is to have it open. Actually, in the proposal, it didn't have an opening. It just had basically when we're going to start. And so we're looking at 2019, early 2019. Okay? So that's kind of where we're at as far as the voice of the timeline of the residents. So just to make sure that we're as up to date and where we're at, the timeline we presented to the township, this was in early May. So our trustee requested a meeting with the treasurer to go over funding. And at that point in time, the meeting derailed to something totally different. But at that meeting, we presented the timeline from here down, that we would have schematic designs, which we were off just a little bit, but it didn't hurt us too bad. Our cost estimates came in right at the end of June, 1st of July, so just about right. The design development is where we're behind slightly, because as we get close enough or 80 or 90% done on one thing, the architects start going and say, okay, well, we'll catch those points as we keep moving forward. But we want to have our construction drawings completed by November 14th. Okay, and it's that date and this date that are really the keys to be able to start the construction by the beginning of 18. So we're really we're starting to butt up against a couple issues. We've got to complete the construction drawing, but we can't do that without a site plan. We did deliver our site plan to the Planning Commission in August. My understanding, and I might have it wrong, is the next step really is for the Township Board to see it, which I thought was the next Township meeting, so that should be this month. But I'll have to check because I've been told that it's not on their agenda at this point in time. But I was told that that was the process, so it's hard for me to understand what the process is. So we'll try and figure that one out. So if we look at it, this presentation actually has our new building being presented by the architect. So forgive me if I say something wrong because I'm not really the architect. I think we're reasonably well, and I got some other people in the room that can help me out. Unfortunately, this here is what's referred to as the canopy. This is the front door. Right now, we're working diligently to afford this. That's a nice way of saying ouch. It's about $100,000 to have a drive-up canopy over it. We're looking to see what we can do. So if you see a library that doesn't have that, that's because we've spent money someplace else. This is though the front entrance. So the top here going down. So the bottom of the page here, the reading patio, that's this high level back here. Remember, this is all the wooded area. The facility sits on, and we'll come to it soon, where the land starts to fall off. There's enough space around it so like the fire trucks can get in, so safety and security wise it's there, but then the land drops off, but this is all the wooded area. Up front here, this is the green area that's here. That's the meeting areas and whatnot, with the children's area, young adults, the adult, and then the staff, and there's the drive-up book drop that I talked about. So that kind of gives you a little flavor for it. The architect will tell you that this is brick. This is a, let's see, from a fiduciary responsibility, siding cost, good, better, best. From a dollar cost, like $22, $10, $5. So as we look to meet the budget, you can see where the lower cost material comes in, and then the higher cost material becomes accents. So back to it won't make Architectural Digest, but nevertheless, we think it's a really nice facility. Lots of glass, so there'll be a lot of light coming in and whatnot. And then the other thing that you've never really needed to know before, but believe it or not, roofs are all going white because they reflect rather than drawing heat. It's a sloped roof, so all of the water actually, it comes on the roof and then it gets drained off versus coming off the edge. And all I can think about is when the ice is forming on Myers and all the shopping carts are in front of us. So I'm thankful for that, so they, those kind of thoughts are in there. There are a couple different elevations. So when we talk about, well, geez, why aren't you just in the basement someplace? We would lose all of the architectural impact that you could have if you were in a basement or first floor. So you get different elevations. So that's from the northeast looking down. We'll go through these a little faster than he did because he drew them, so he was really into it. This is $100,000 less, see? But you still get the drive-up book drop. So, we had them do both with and without, so when you see it, if we can't afford it, then you'll know what happened to it. This is pretty interesting. This view here is looking at it from this direction. So the green, the meeting room space, with hopefully a patio off of it, and then you've got the children's section over here. So looking into the woods, then this space here divided so that you can split the meeting room up. So nice use, even on the back side, some of the back to the good, better, best material. Because if this is a patio and you're having an event, you still want it to look nice. I mean, just because it's on the back of the house, people are still gonna see it. So we tried to do as best as possible.
Is there likely to be room for like a kids' playground on the?
So, I have a question up front here, and in the interest of me trying to get through it, I'm not really entertaining questions, and I think you'll get yours answered.
Okay.
It's just, all right. So then you have the southeast. So that's coming from back here. Right now, there's a question on the land side and the opening side, if the children's play area should be back here, or if it should come off the other side. It has to do with the topographical look of where it is and how it was. But the idea is that these things marked patio area are patio play type areas. So there is access out of the building on the ground floor to those areas. Now, again, I talk about 100,000 for a canopy. These patios, look forward to a fundraising opportunity where you can name a brick. I think some of the areas maybe be name a fence post. This facility, again, digress. When we were looking at architects, we had architects come in, and one of them obviously didn't do their homework real well, because when we said amount of the bond proposal and what we have for the actual building, they kind of looked at each other like, how are we gonna build something for that little bit amount of money? So we're challenged. So some of the things we want to do could be, well, temporary something today, and maybe tomorrow we can do something better. We don't know. We're working on it. We'll work to see. But honestly, so far, we've already spent about the equivalent of 3 learning centers on additional legal fees that we didn't anticipate. So as we spend money where we didn't anticipate, things go away. So again, fireplace, and the nice casual setting from that side. The less impressive side, we'll go past that one. This is southwest. He likes putting with and without canopies, so. I've got the bigger layout sitting over here. This kind of chunked it out. This had some ideas of chairs and shelving and whatnot. We've gone way past, again, this presentation was for our July board meeting. They've gone way past where this is right now. I mean, this has like straight shelves and stuff, and I mean, it's dressed up a lot better. But there are people counting every chair, counting every table. You know, are these bookshelves in the children's area? I mean, these are too tall. I mean, a lot of kids can't get to them. So, I mean, these are only, I don't know, 3 high instead of 5 high. So there's all this kind of detail that goes into it, including this area here, which is the this blue area. That's like, what do they call it there? I want to make sure. Young adult. I almost said teens. So young adults. I mean, there's like a gaming, you know, here with a big screen. So I mean, so there's a lot of detail that's gone into this, and it continues to evolve even from this drawing here. So they keep working on it. Our site plan is, what do you plan to do with the site? That's the term site plan. So as you're aware, the facility or the property we purchased for the lack of a better term, behind Kroger, over off Elizabeth Lake. We started negotiation to buy 3 acres, then we went to 5 acres, and then the previous owner said, well, we've got this other low-lying area. So sometimes in some conversations, you might hear a very technical term called buildable and non-buildable. One would argue anything's buildable for a price, but there's some less than prime area, basically wetter lands, stuff that you'd really have to go really deep for borings or stuff like that. So when you hear somebody start talking about the property that we have, if it's buildable or non-buildable, prime versus non-prime, that's the site plan. So our site plan, the biggest contention was how to get on it. So, here's the property, and for Kroger, M59, so as you know, there's a curve, and then there's the backside of Kroger, and then there's some benches, and then to town centers down here. So we looked at the facility, or our site, as what makes sense. And here's the building. These are just all topographical where the land falls off. This is kind of the wetter area, less prime, plus it slopes down. So we said we could draw an entrance here and come right on our property and come right off of Elizabeth Road. And then we said, but safety-wise and to be more in line with the township.
Move the picture up so people can
I
see.
can't.
Oh, yeah, all right,
She's
sorry.
well,
You'll lose it. Okay.
can't do it. So our property ends here. So to be part of a township campus, we said we could move our driveway to the south portion of our property. So you would actually turn in and then turn in. So that would make it, you're not turning directly into a parking area where you gotta worry about people, movement, kids, whatnot. So you would actually come in and then turn again. And we've offered to the township, if we do this, you could then turn into your property and make it the first building in the campus or something along those lines. So we offered up that. The second one though, and because this means it's totally on the property owned by the library. We're playing in our own sandbox. We're only using our facilities. We're not dictating to anybody what you should or shouldn't do on yours. We're only taking ours. The other option, if the township moves forward, would be to straddle this entrance. It could be, half on theirs, half on ours, carry over. Or depending on your input, Wednesday, to the study analysis community presentation. I mean, if they wanted to move it down a couple 100 feet or whatever, that's fine, as long as they get it built the same time the library's built. So we've offered up some different options. There's been comments about stormwater, sharing cost. Unfortunately, when you look at the facility here versus where the township has kind of said where they thought maybe they might like to potentially put their facility, you would be moving water a long way, just a long distance. But since they're not finished, we can't really say for a fact what is and what isn't. We can say for a fact that if we do some kind of shared entrance like this, we can share cost. And equally as a driver, I hate it when there's a driveway and then the road narrows and then there's another, turn off. Why don't you just make it 4 lanes all the way across? So there is an opportunity to share approach deceleration and acceleration lanes with a township on a site plan. So we are moving forward through the process for a site plan approval. And I guess we'll stay tuned to see where that goes.
Question back
No,
here.
no, no, no.
So there's no proposal from either the library or the township to try to reclaim wetland, is that correct?
As I said before, we're not really doing any questions. This is an informational meeting.
Oh,
And I didn't answer his question when he asked it. So from that perspective, I will refrain from answering your question at this time.
okay.
Let me get through the rest of it. And then I'd like to say somebody else will answer your question. We'll see what we can do. So this is pretty much at the end of July where we were at. Getting ready for a site plan presentation, which did go in, like I said, in August. So that step was made. I've got a sales pitch here from our construction manager, but since Aaron's not here, and unfortunately, for those of you that want to watch this, this was not planned at all. The poor guy, and he kept hitting his button, and I kept flipping pages on. It was one of those worst nightmares of a presentation. But nevertheless, McCarthy and Smith have been working on it. This is the charrette process that we went through that now another firm wants to do again. So that pretty much brings me down to which was the July current problem, which really hasn't changed. The problem is that the majority of the White Lake Township Board has not passed a resolution to fund the bonds or issue the bonds that you, the voters, passed. So how the lawyers did this is beyond me. But the legislation actually does allow them not to fund the bonds, even though you voted for it, even though you said go do this. We have, as I said, we've spent enough legal funds and been educated that they do have the legal position on their side. Whether or not they have the moral or the fiduciary or whatever, that's for you to decide, not for me to decide. So they haven't done that. Contrary to the problem at this point in time in July, they have decided that they can do two things at one time. And the township board has requested the clerk to identify what's required to move forward on the bonds. Because my position was, if we can move forward with you on what you dictated as far as a joint advisory committee, then you could at least start the process, because it's like a 3-month process to issue the bonds. So you don't need to wait to start your process, go ahead and start now. So they haven't taken any action, I wasn't there, but even getting them to think about starting the process sounded like it was even hard for them to do. So, but they've given us a letter of the things that are required, for which half of them we already gave to them, so we're working on that, and we will make sure they have it in a timely fashion. The problem is cash. Cash is king in business, cash is king just about everywhere. We're looking at our cash flow. Our treasurer is doing it on a monthly basis. And without the bond funding, the library could potentially run out of cash in the October timeframe. Because yes, and I've heard this too many times, yes, we purchased the property out of the fund balance we had, because when you as a voter go to vote on a proposal, there's all of the language that says, this is what you want, and then there's this language that says it's 0.47 mils per hundred and blah, 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 and all this financial stuff. Believe it or not, that financial stuff is not just stuff, it's actually calculated. And the calculation is no more than you going and buying your house. And when are you gonna buy it? When are you gonna close? How much are you gonna borrow? When are you gonna start paying it back? Okay, this is how much you owe when you start paying it back. So back in March of 16, when we went to the township to get it on the ballot, there was a financial consultant from the township that said, okay, if you take this amount of money and you start collecting it in December of 17, you issue the bonds in July of 17, it should be on our tax rolls, I'm not gonna say yours, it should be on my tax bill this December, because that's what we voted. And because the bonds are issued in July, the money starts being collected in December, that's how they calculated how much you were gonna pay. So as a library board person, knowing that the bonds were supposed to be issued in July, our whole process of going through this has been dictated based on the bonds would be funded in July. We would then, from the money that we paid for the property in the beginning of the year, would be paid back to us. The whole bond and cost process is kind of, you gotta think about it for a second. It's the townships issuing the bonds. We, as the library board and McCarthy, the construction manager, are building the building, but we're actually presenting the bills to the township, and they're paying them out of the bond. So it doesn't show up on our income statement or our P&L or expenses. It all flows through this bond fund. But we nevertheless did issue the money for the property. We've been paying the consulting fees, all in anticipation of presenting a bill to the township to say, okay, this is what comes out of the bond money. They have neither voted yes, and they have not voted no, that they weren't gonna vote the bonds. They just haven't done anything. So we continue to work to the timeline to the benefit of all the residents to meet the budget that we came up with. Now we're really into an issue of cash, so we're doing what we can to make sure that we stay open for as long as we can. So that's kind of the current problem of July remains the current problem of September. Inaction or cash discussion from the township. We've shown the cash flow before. It's in this presentation. So, the library operates at about $1.2 million. So our tax, you all pay, we pay, I pay. So our revenue's just about $1.1 million, $1.2 million. This is the cash, or the revenue for this year to date, just under $1.1 million. Without getting into all the muddy details, the most one that people find interesting is when you get a state police pulls somebody over, the monies go to the library. So they don't go to the police fund, they go to the library. So all of those state troopers working on the borders, so the libraries like over in Berrien County, like over there by Indiana, all those truckers that are like, you know, doing what they shouldn't be, they're helping fund those libraries. So we get some money throughout the year, but the majority of our money comes in at the December, January, February, when we all pay our property taxes. You can see there's little bits coming in, and then there's some nice in August, some little bit. So it'll be about $1.2 million. Our personnel expenses operate is about just around number 70% of our budget. So it's people, it's people here to support you. Then we've got the actual heat, light, power type of things. Here's what we had spent through June. So we've got the land closing costs, some attorney fees, more attorney fees when we found out the township wasn't gonna do what we thought they were. And then we've got consulting fees going out. This was forecast. Obviously, this is updated by the treasurer. Sorry, I just took the old presentation. remember, I'm a highly paid person, so I'm reusing the value. Your collections, services, so at the end of, April, we had $700,000 still in cash. As we pay our bills, our checkbook goes down, and then in October we have a problem. So that is a challenge for, the board and our treasurer now. Which brings me to the last slide, and then, we'll just free talk for a few minutes, and then we'll go to questions and answers. So, my request to you all, if you are a voter, if you believe in the process, meaning if I vote, it gets counted, and whoever has more votes, that is the wish of the majority of the people, and that's what we should do. If you believe in that process, the next White Lake Township Board meeting is actually September 19th. I highly encourage you to attend the meeting and voice your opinion. Now, I know there are a lot of people that don't like to stand up and talk. I mean, I'm not a fan of it, especially when I got Ken in the back room with his camera, and I didn't even wear a tie. So, if you come to the meeting, and I really, really, really hope you do, if you don't wish to stand up and talk, I'm okay with that. I only have one simple request. Wear something green. Green is for money. Show me the money. I think if you want to come and support the library, if you want to have your voice heard, although maybe you voted for it and it hasn't quite been heard loud enough, if you come, please feel free to speak. I'm not telling you not to. Tell the township board whatever you wish, and maybe you're for what they want. Tell them what you want. I'm free speech, that's no problem. But wear green. Because I want the township board to be reminded that there are a lot of people out there, even if only 5 people or 6 people talk, that there are a lot more people in favor of the process. The township had the ability a year and a half ago now, to say this is what we want to do. They had the ability before we bought our property to say, hey, wait a minute, we have an idea. They had the ability when they bought their property to say, wait a minute, we have an idea. They have had multiple opportunities to say we have an idea. It was when the library approached the township in May, after they had closed on their property, I think at the end of March or February, it was early, they have had the opportunity. I can tell you, do a Freedom of Information request. The only email from the township to the library has been Mike Roman, when he's asked for more information, for which we said we would provide. But other than that, it has been a one-way communication. The township came over here for one meeting and brought their camera. They didn't come to another meeting, but they brought their camera, which is all good. I mean, I don't mind. It's public information. It's great. I mean, I just find it interesting the way in which the process, to me, isn't working. So, in May, we had the presentation about this shared 30,000 square foot building, for which then I learned the township currently has a facility of 14,000 square feet. That would mean the township wishes to more than double the size of their facility. That also says the White Lake Library Board of the library didn't say, hey, can you guys afford it? No, we didn't ask. I mean, that's your business. So they wanted to do this building, yet they really didn't know what they needed. They just came in with a 30,000 square foot building. they said, let's put together this joint committee to study the effects and the ability of a combined building. That was in May. In June, I received an email saying, here are the 7 names, of which they were all employees or trustees of the township. So a month later, I get a list of who's on the committee. And the 4 names from the library, or the 4 spots for the library to fill on this joint equal committee. July township meeting, they finally hired a consulting firm, Inform Studio out of Northville. Nice guys so far. And in August, we had our first joint meeting with the 7 representatives from the library and the 7 representatives from the township. I encourage you to attend the meeting. Unfortunately, I can't share, I don't have all the details of what the meeting is really gonna be, but I also wanna set your expectations, because somebody that stood up back there, he didn't answer his question and he already left, so hopefully he's still around. This is not a question and answer meeting. This is just gonna be, this is how we will get your information. This is how you can go to our website and put in your information. Okay, so don't go there thinking you're gonna get up and stand and, so don't practice your speech and vent and, anything like that. But do come, and we'll have people here at the library with the computers to help you get to the right place to fill out their surveys. And I am a part of this advisory meeting, or committee, but so far, there has not been any discussion about the 2 cohabitating if this was a joint facility, which is what the whole conversation started in May. Should it be a joint building? This study has nothing to do so far, and what I have seen, see, I qualify all, so far what I've seen with a joint facility. This is the way for the township to do a master plan of the property, of their site, under the guise that it's gonna be like some kind of joint building. But that's not really how it's working out so far. I'm still open-minded. We're only 4 weeks into a 12-week process, so we'll see if it shifts. But so far, it is nothing, and there's been no conversation about who are the constituents, how many people use the township hall, There is zero. They have stated this emphatically. There is no discussion about cost. So when we go back to this whole, there's cost savings to be in the same similar building, this study is not discussing cost. So again, I want you to be level set about, what I have heard and what they have said so far about what our joint meetings, or this joint advisory meeting is gonna be. So, please attend. But I think as supporters of the library, I really need you to stand up for your voting right. I need you to stand up for the library. I need you to voice your support for the library. We will start, and we are starting a campaign to make this more known, to make sure people understand that the elected officials, the male elected officials at the township are not really doing what you as voters said. The problem you run into is, and these aren't always what I say, I am only repeating. One analogy was, if the school board came to you and said, we're gonna put in pools at all the high schools, we need you to fund $8.6 million, and we're gonna put in these school pools. You voted it in, you thought your kid was gonna have swimming lessons, a swim team, and all that stuff, And then the township board comes along and says, you know what? All those kids are gonna get old, so why don't we build one community retirement pool in the middle for 8.6 million? You all get your pool and you can just come here and swim. Because our idea is better and we'll just do it centrally. But you voted for something else and they changed this. Somebody said, oh, the Parks and Rec, they're doing a fine job, they're getting people input. You know, what do you want, what do you see, what do you value? So hypothetically speaking, you value more pathways down Elizabeth Lake Road. Great, they fund it, you know, 0.5 mils, they're supposed to put pathways in, and the township decides, you know what, we just built this new facility, we'd really like just to have a pathway down to the lake. So we'll take the Parks and Rec money and do that instead because we think that's the better idea for the funds. That's not what you voted for. That's not the implied contract you have when you voted. We have an implied contract, 30,000 square foot, on that property in a short time frame because we said we would do it immediately. I mean, if we built the library up on White Lake Road, just because you voted for a library, that wouldn't be right. We said we were gonna put it there. So that's where it should be. It's a library there. That's what we promised. That's what the board is trying to do, deliver on our promise. We only wish the township board would deliver on the request of you, the citizens. Fund the library, get it going. If you want to do a township campus, great. Put it to the voters. Let them decide. I mean, that's all it takes. Just put them to the voters. It would be great if they put it to the voters, do you want a new public safety and do you want a new township versus just, you know, put it all together so you could, you know, do a la carte menu versus, you know, the whole thing. But again, that's not for me to decide how they want to put it to the voters, but let them do that, let them decide. So please attend the meetings. If you can, come to the township meeting. Remember, green money? Come in green. Come speak your opinion. I think that's all I have as far as me standing up here. And so, what I will do now is I'm going to take questions, and I will take it in a methodical process. Because these people sat up front. I see one hand already starting to go up over on this side. I will work down this side, and then I will work back up this way. And by the time I get over here, my voice will be gone, and then I won't have to answer any questions. But they know it all too well. So the first, and I have no idea who asked, as far as the wetland question, I have no idea what the township's doing. We are working through our site plan. We are not mitigating any wetlands. We will use them as we see fit. And in actuality, it's hard to tell, but off of the parking lot, maybe a walk pathway, maybe some kind of pavilion, you know, maybe there's enough slope in, you know, 5 or 6 years, there's an outdoor amphitheater, I don't know. But we plan to leave this, believe it or not, we actually counted all the trees. So, you know, so there's an inventory.
How many were there?
Was that before or after the storm? But in here, there's, you know, this is where the, well, the land doesn't quite go that far. But these are all gradients of where the land drops off. But the river's back here, so we've got some constraints, but we're not doing any, we are building on what we purchased as the quote-unquote buildable acres. This is the flat land. This is the least cost, least amount of effort financially to do it. So hopefully, he wasn't here, but that's the answer. Yes.
I was.
You did hear me say I would go this way and come back.
This is on the same side. You know the little, farmer's market that's right there when I drove by?
No, the
there's-
little farmer's
So I was
market's
right
way
there.
up here.
Oh, okay, so
It's
like
way up
if you drew the end of that building.
So Kroger
across-
driveway
Okay,
is here. So,
okay.
The back of,
So-
the back
Back.
driveway.
the back driveway, behind Kroger.
Yeah.
Okay, so the frontage.
Not the pharmacy entrance, but the.
The way- okay.
Yeah, the truck entrance, way back, it's on the curb. This property is retained, I'm not the scuttlebutt person, the Kroger and the owner, they've got water issues, and so no, they retained all that, we didn't want it. The property value goes up dramatically because now you got M59 frontage.
Yeah.
This group that's been doing the Inform Studios, the input they've received is White Lake Township is a pass-through community. People just drive through it. So if you're on M59, it's a lot of money. We looked at property because when we were looking at this for 600,000, the properties over here on M59, like 150 feet wide and deep, you know, they're like $1 million properties. Kind of thing. So that's it for that side of the room. No. Tiger baseball.
Simple question. I know this place is small, but what's the square footage?
Square footage of this is 9,000, so
15,000 for the.
14,000 something for them.
That was police?
Yeah, the question was that with police? The 14,000,
For 10,000.
we're 10, so 10 here, 14 there with police, that
Everything's
building is there. So if they had this facility, then they would have 24,000.
And the campus.
Hold on a second. So not to put you guys on pressure, any second row, third row, I'm working my way back, I see a hand. Go.
First and foremost, I want to thank you for acting on behalf of the voters and exercising our rights as voters here in White Lake Township. The question that I have is, what do you anticipate the township will do in order to keep the doors open of the library in October? Do you anticipate them loaning money to keep the doors open? What kind of pressure are we putting on the township in order to keep the library doors open?
So, great question. Factual first, opinion second. Personnel is this number here, so just say 50,000, 55. The process that is currently used to save everybody money, meaning you and the library payroll is processed through the township. So just like a lot of you guys have ADP at work, you know, we have WLT. So they process our payroll. We're, my position, we're not gonna give them the money. Because if you were, and unfortunately I wasn't here at our last board meeting and they did authorize it, but if you add that up, just do simple math, 50, 50, 50, 50, that's 200, that takes us through October. So all we have to do is not give them their personnel costs. Unfortunately, at this point in time, they have not accepted our proposal of not paying them the personnel money. My position is, my position, not thus the board, this is like a business. You are my largest creditor. I stop paying you first. So we will stop giving them the money for the payroll. But that only does so much. The good side of it is, if we can get through October, November, you get a little, oh, I forgot to mail out the checks. December, we actually start getting thank you for a lot of us that have your money paid by escrow. The money actually starts coming in end of November, beginning of December. So we have the potential to run out, but we also have the potential that we can make it. The land and new building, we're working with the consultants just to taper what we're doing. There could be some out-of-pocket costs that we elect not, we can defray or whatever. But worst case scenario, if the library's closed, we'll just let you return your books to the supervisor's office. Yeah, it's a walk across the park. That would be like a campus. If it's raining, I don't know. The township does have a drop box. They do have a drop box. I don't suggest you use it. Please, for all of you watching this and listening, that is not my intent. Do not drop your books in the township drop box. You might get a fine, and then that would only increase the revenue. So I can see this is what I was saying. So for all of you that I've just passed over with no questions, make sure you wear green, okay? So you expect green, all right. Any other questions? Yes, I'm coming from the back and he's behind you, so you there, sir.
To me, this sounds like a perfect example of scope creep of a project, and
Scope creep?
yeah, and you have a stuff project, and you're starting to creep outside of what you have.
What you
planned to do.
identified as your project, yeah.
So we as a community need to really express that this is really unacceptable. And that's just a comment, but one of my questions is, pardon my ignorance, but what is our plan for the current building that we have here?
So, good question. There's at least two options. So the plan for this building, and the White Lake Library Board asked the township in May, would you like to utilize this facility for the community members? And in May, we asked them, please give us your feedback, and then you can have this facility because it's paid for, it's ADA approved, and you could use it. I mean, you paid for it, I paid for it, so use it. Thus far, they have not said whether they want it or not. The library board's second option is to lease it out and generate revenue. I'd hate to see it sit here empty. So, as a way to defray operating costs, we could then lease the facility out. Those are the two easiest, clearest, quickest options that I can think of. If you've got another one, welcome here. Hold on one second.
Very good, thank you.
Restart here. All right. When you say scope creep, that's when somebody says develop a new pen, and then they come up with a pen, but then they put a light on the end of it, and then it costs more money. Some people have used a different term than scope creep because they're not quite in the same field as you. They call it bait and switch.
Yeah.
So this is you just bought yourself you voted for a Cherokee, and now somebody wants you to have a Grand Cherokee. So, or vice versa. So, sir, orange and the orange.
That was my question.
That was your question. Come up with a better one.
That was a good one.
It was good when he said it. Yes, sir.
I think everyone should be aware of this questionnaire that you're going to answer on the computer. You have 1 week in which to reply.
Since from when?
From Wednesday night for a week. Yeah, they don't want to drag it out so that they can make plans for their second meeting Monday. So it's important to get
Timely.
on the stick, so to speak,
Yeah.
right away.
All right.
I have two questions. One, has the plans been turned in at all for like site review, engineering review, any of that? And the second question is there a time period on the bonds that were approved that, do they expire? Does it have to be done in 6 months, 6 years?
Okay, so two questions, totally separate. One is back to the site plan. So I was led to believe that so your first question was there engineering reviews, plans, and all whatnot. So we have met with the Township Planning Department, and they use 2 outside consulting firms for oh God, hydrology and roads or whatever. So they used two firms, to help support their workload. So those gentlemen were at the meeting. We showed them a little prettier picture than what you saw. They asked a few detailed questions. We have submitted all of that to their August 18th Planning Commission meeting. So yes, that was done.
So that's the conceptual site plan.
That is the conceptual site plan. So
Okay.
that's done. And it is the one with us playing in our own sandbox, so on our side of the property. I was led to believe the next step would be the next township meeting. So the 18th is a preliminary approval from the site commission, or from the planning commission. Then the next township meeting, there should be a review and a preliminary meeting by the township board of trustees. I am told now that for some reason we're not on the next meeting. So we're not being treated, or I don't know the process, we're not being treated like any other building or
You
site
didn't go
plan.
through the first meeting.
No, that was in August 18th. So we did a preliminary meeting with the four guys. Then they went to the planning commission with all the documentation, all of the,
Yeah,
all
okay.
of it. And then the next meeting should be September at the board of trustees. So that's your first question. And then I don't know how it goes from that to the final. I kind of like just had to get through the first two steps and then I would go next. Maybe you know better, I don't know. The second question is about the bonds. The bond question was, do they expire, do you have to use them, whatever. So I will expand your question and give you a little bit more information than what you asked, because you're allowing me to do that. The bonds were issued for a project, based on your wish, which is the implied contract of a 30,000 square foot building at that site. We are told that if we would have put into the bond proposal that we're gonna build a 30,000 square foot building at that site, it's gonna have a water fountain in the front with pink flamingos, and the building is gonna be bright green, that's what those bonds have to be used for. It is not to be used for something other than what the implied contract was. Those bonds do not have a date certain of when they have to be issued. So, 20 years from now, somebody could come up, I think the problem you would have, the longer it takes, they actually have to have a bonding attorney firm, like, give a letter of, somebody said readiness? It's not even a recommendation, it's an opinion letter. So that the opinion of the bonding attorney is these are being used for what they were supposed to be for. So if it isn't, then you run into a little issue. I'll come back to you in a second, sir, I got you ticked off. The other, no, you're not ticked off. The other issue we hear some is, oh, well, we'll build two buildings and, we'll combine them and all this. Well, you can technically take public money from one source and public money from another source and put it together. You can do that. Just look at the Little Caesars Arena. I mean, there is public money from more than one place. To do that costs money in attorney's fees, more accounting fees. So when you're looking at a project this small, the percentage of costs to do that is a great percentage. I mean, if you're doing a $862 million new arena and you're paying a lawyer, $1 million, it's around here. If we pay $1 million, that's 12% of the budget. So from that perspective, it can be done. It's just not smart to do something like that. But there is no time limit on that. So, sir.
Well, you said at the beginning that we explored the legal, they've got the law on their side, but from what you just said about the vote being for a library, how can they appropriate that money to try to build municipal offices for themselves if the bond was just for the library? It seems like that's what they're trying to do.
to do a combined building on a site other than where we're ours, yeah, the library is moving to a library building. The library isn't moving to a township hall, so, yeah, I don't know how they plan on, how they think, you'd have to ask them. Hold on one second there, yes.
Okay, since I'm gonna find out. I have a question about this flyer.
Uh-huh.
Where did it come from? Is this part of that $45,000 study that the township now has created to
Yeah.
waylay our library plans?
So the question is, for those of you that didn't go home and you came straight here because this was more important, in your mail, so please, a lot of you don't always look at all your mail. You get this White Lake Township, they still have the CIDI, whatever. So yes, this came from the advisory committee with the sole purpose to get your attention to the timeline. This is a part of, well, no, the $45,000, the way I understand it, is the fee to Inform Studio, the consulting fee. So this is an expense over and above that.
Yes.
However, kudos to the library. Denise worked with our library firm that does all of our mailing. And the township was gonna, put a, what are they, 47 cents, 50 cents? Whatever stamp is. They were gonna put these first-class postage. They used the library bulk mail thing, so it's about a third of the price, so yeah, we were, our 7 members of the team were aware that it was coming out and gave some input into it and whatnot, so.
How does this timeline, 3 meetings, 1 month, we're
So-
behind already.
So actually, she's asked about the timeline. This timeline in no way, shape, or form fits the library building timeline. This timeline, if the township only works in a straight line or in series, they would say they would wait until this date and then they would start the bond process. If that's the direction. That is why we said, well, wait a minute. If we're gonna participate in this, there should be another line here that says you're collecting bond data, you're doing the things for the bond. So when you reach the realization, or hopefully you reach the realization that a library, as it was proposed, in the timeline that was proposed, and as it was voted for, that then you can be issuing your bonds like November 9th. And then we can be, it's gonna be tough. So that's how it goes. But no, if this timeline would have started, so in May, Rick brought up the idea.
The conceptual.
May 22nd, I didn't say it, you did.
I watched the 2.5-hour video, Saturday night till 1:30 in the morning, and irate.
So if it would have started in July, it would be done, and we wouldn't be in the position. So, I just want you to make sure that you, I mean, to give some support to it, to answer to it, and call out your irateness. But unfortunately, the way the survey is written today, you get to answer questions. There is no fill in the blank for your thoughts. Hold on one second.
The second meeting in that process is going to be a more, a time that you can give your opinion on the options that they present. So I encourage you, if you can go to that one, that's the one you want to go to.
The October 18th meeting,
Are you
it is,
taking
you
notes?
can put your hands on, I got you.
He's also taping the meetings.
I'll be there. Or my team will be there.
can, we think they're away from you.
Sorry. I thought everybody likes them.
The ideas and concepts, I'm told they've already decided there will be 3 ideas. I know what 1 is. I've got a good guess of what number 2 is. I have no idea what 3 is. So I'm not sure how the advisory team is coming up with 3 ideas. But yes, to Denise's point, there will be a point in time for your voice to be spoken.
Some of those dates are on the library newsletter that you should have received Saturday or today as well. And it's
And they're on our
online.
website,
On the
and we'll
website.
remind you, and, yeah, just come show. So hold on a second, I have 2 more hands up. So in fairness, we haven't finished the front row, so go ahead.
I just have a question. You said you were paying attorney fees.
Mhm.
Are you still paying attorney fees, and what are they for?
Are we still paying attorney fees, and what are they for? So, no, we have not had any attorney fee, well, let's see, how should I phrase this correctly? We may have received a bill, but I know I have not had a conversation with any legal-ish person in, what is this, September, probably 6 weeks or so, 8 weeks. So no, we're not, I mean, it's a dead horse.
Okay.
Unfortunately. That is not to say that in the next step of the process that we won't start incurring more legal fees.
But what's the attorney for? Is it just questions you had that you're asking, or?
Like, how could this be? I don't understand. So in education, all right, so, yes, sir.
I have a two-parter.
Two-part.
First of all, when you said that the township can hold up issuing these bonds, you have to do that for some cause. That's one of the things. Secondly, when the bonds were, the arithmetic was done to the bonds, isn't that time sensitive? You can't issue these 20 years from now, expect the same arithmetic.
So the question is, the first one,
What's the cause?
the cause for them not to do it, and the second one is the math right. So, not a lawyer, are you? Thankfully. Okay, so I might get this wrong, so don't take this as your legal cliff notes. When the bond proposal was on the ballot, it was a permissive type language. So we gave them permission to do something. Even though it says they shall issue, I don't know how a lawyer gets thou shall issue into a permission, but that's the legalish type version of the language, that your vote only gave them the permission to go do it. It wasn't, hold on, it wasn't, and I'll get the wrong word, persuasive, that said that they have to do it. So because, right, so because we, and I will stand up and say, because I am getting my education, when we went to the township and said, this is the proposal, they all said yes, put it on. There was never a thought that we should go to an independent lawyer, not the township lawyer, to see if this is the right language. So your vote was only to give them the permission to do something. They don't have to have a cause other than, I don't want it.
Well, they certainly can't have the cause that they want to do something else with the money.
Now, that would definitely be back to the attorneys, because our attorney who wrote the language, who told us that if there's a pink flamingo in the proposal, you better put a damn pink flamingo in it, they can't take the money and say, well, now we're gonna turn it into something. We're gonna build a fire station, a police station, and we'll put a book drop on it and call it a library. We can't do that. The second thing is the money side of it. The arithmetic is not an absolute. That is only to give you an indication of about what it will be, because when they do the math, they're taking the tax roll at the time, And now that if there's more buildings or whatever, so it's just an approximation, and it's supposed to be pretty gosh darn close of what it's gonna be.
But
But
it had to do with the current economic.
it's the current economic, the current, the money.
Interest rate on the bonds.
Well, the assumption of interest rate, the assumption of the tax base, well, which they're pretty good at, you know, as far
But
as.
the longer time goes on, the more that deviates.
The longer it is, the more off there.
Yeah.
Absolutely, totally agree. So, likewise, when we put together the proposal of 8.6 million, we can't all of a sudden, 30,000 square foot building, we're gonna spend 5 million. We can't say, well, geez, let's just do 15,000 square foot and we'll put in like really nice stuff. No, we said we were gonna do 30,000 and it's gonna cost this, so we gotta do that. Wait a minute, no, I think you were, yes.
This is not a question.
Okay.
But basically, my wife went to meet with one of the male trustees today
Okay.
regarding this issue and asked for a meeting with him. After a considerable amount of time where he met with someone else came to the door, then he went to the restroom, and lo and behold, she's still there waiting. And so he agreed to meet with her. And she expressed some feelings about the fact that what we voted for, that they're kind of throwing this kind of out the window and coming up with another alternative. His whole argument seemed to be that he, as a trustee, has a fiduciary responsibility to look at maybe incorporating other things into this. And that was basically his whole argument, and was not really receptive to saying, well, the vote was for this, and now you're throwing this all up in the air, and why should we even vote for something when you have the capability of just disregarding the will of the voters? And, but he's just totally defensive on his position, and it just didn't really go anywhere.
I thank you for your point. If everybody wishes to go take up their time and let them hear it, I think that would be awesome. I do believe they have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. I don't believe their fiduciary responsibility is an oversight of the library. I think if they have a true fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, they would look at all options available to themselves. and do what they need to. I mean, I had no idea. They bought 26 acres, 14 or 11 buildable, and they thought this was a great campus site and all this. Somebody just told me this is 17 acres, right here. The property, the
How
park.
much did they spend on that?
How much did they spend on it? 1.6 million?
Where'd they get that?
1.6 million. So I'm not gonna answer, stuff that I'm not totally, like full on. But they purchased the property because they had other properties that they've owned and sold, so they did not take it out of their current operating budgets. However, their current operating budget, I believe if you look at their budget, it does have about a $300,000, or they're using funds out of mine.
They actually did take it out of operating funds,
Oh.
and they passed a resolution to okay the fact that when a bond is passed, then they would replenish the funds with that. They also passed a similar thing for us. So it is, according to township, that's correct, right, Liz?
So
Everything's
they
good
did
with
use their
it.
operating funds?
Yeah,
Wow.
and they then, at the same meeting, they
They
approved a budget amendment to
to
make
do
the
that.
move.
I didn't realize we had that much money. No, the township. So that's it, okay, now hands are starting to pop. Wait a minute, somebody I haven't heard from, and then I'll come back to you and then.
We share an email address, so when we fill out the survey, is it only going to count as one? how do we?
Yes,
Yeah, you're nodding yes it will, or yes you wanna take
Yeah.
the question, because the
It's
same
gonna-
issue is over at the senior center, where a lot of people will come for support in here, so.
they're, they're asking for an email address to make sure someone doesn't put in 100
So,
votes. So
my,
one vote per person.
well, my input
Or
from the
email, but-
advisory team meeting we were at, for which the two representatives were not the most tech savvy, said that even though you share the same IP address, the same email address, as long as it isn't a continuous repetitive theme, you know, we don't need 100 people or 100 lines saying, you know, make it blue. You know, if it's different thoughts and process, then they'll look at it, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. So I wouldn't get worried about voting or whatever. If you both put in information, I am told it will be read. Okay, so back to you.
You said something earlier about the men on the board that voted. If I understand what you said, some of them originally, when this was passed, said, yes, the bonds are okay, go for it.
Correct.
And then changed their mind after the November election, or when new power came into play in the township office?
Okay, so to try to be clear, when the township voted to put it on the ballot, Andrea Voorhees was still on the board. She was then, she put it on the ballot. She has said, I may not agree, but the voters voted, so do it. So female approved it, she says do it. Liz Smith was not on the board, she was on the library board. She says do it. So the two females on the current board, the voters voted, do it. It is the male counterparts. One has said, I'm waiting for the study. Unfortunately, the study isn't gonna do anything about what a combined building says, and the other one's looking at what the layout would be.
Was that when they originally, when the board unanimously,
Uh-huh.
you've been talking, unanimously voted
To
to
put it on
allow
the
it to
ballot.
proceed?
Yeah.
Are some of those same board members on this new board that is now stalling?
I won't use the word some.
Yeah,
All.
the November
Okay.
election.
The only one that isn't there was replaced by Liz.
Okay.
So it was all good one time, thankfully.
Thank you, I didn't
It just
catch
kind of-
that the first time around.
No, it's not a light switch. I feel like I'm in the dark.
Or most of them.
Not just,
Yeah, I know, but there's a light switch.
Oh,
So, were you gonna,
yeah, it was covered.
so, back to Jerry?
When we had the citizens committee raising funds to get mailings out and stuff before the election last year, when we approached different businesses, a lot of the business people said, Township Hall doesn't want that. They told us, they don't want it. They thought we were gonna be defeated. That's why they approved it. I'm sorry, that's the bottom line.
I won't speak to
Yeah,
it. I don't think
okay,
that
no.
Just because the township board, and not defending anything, approves for something to go on the ballot, doesn't mean that the township people are voting for it. They're just allowing it to go on the ballot. So it could be that the women, when you've got the bubble in your sheet, it could be that they voted no for it. It could be a guy voted for it. And well, you know, and frankly, I'm like, we need to stop defining people by men and women here.
No, I will not, because I do not want you as individuals to go to the trustees and yell at them all equally. You can put your anger towards the appropriate people. And the appropriate people have to be of the male gender. That's it.
Or just Liz and
Liz and
Andrea
Andrea are on our
with-
side, go after the
and the
rest.
rest of you. There you go.
Go sit in their office, go visit with them, call them, email them. Because some of you must have voted for them to be in office. If your vote counted for them to be in office, why didn't your vote count for something else. That's fine. I'm just about the process. I will take two more questions. And I saw two hands go up really quick, and I'll let the lady go. Sorry, the first line.
I'm sorry, but I don't know, who is the head of the township board?
Rick Cole.
Can you tell me his name? Rick Cole.
This-
And was he just elected?
So,
He's been on
Rick,
the board, he's been on the board.
you guys can answer that question.
Last November.
All right.
We have contact information for all the board members here, so there's your lead.
Thank you.
Hold on one second, I said I would take two.
You mentioned a campaign to raise awareness to this issue. Really, I just learned about this over the weekend. What do you propose to campaign? What is your format to campaign to get the word out about the library?
So I tell you what, if you would like to, actually the lady right in front of you, if you would like to give your contact information,
Already got it.
and then we will, get feedback.
There is a Facebook site too, White Lake Happening, and I posted on it today and put all the names of the people in a letter that I sent to them all. And, that's, a lot of people are referring there.
Each service desk has a form that you can put your name and address and get more information about the new building, not necessarily about a campaign, but about the new building, which will include some of those things.
Thank you.
Again, I appreciate your support, I look for your continued support, and hopefully I'll see some of you on Wednesday night.